So today we are talking about microorganisms and we are talking about enzymes. What do those have in common, you might ask? So last time we had a look at microenzymes and we learned that they are one of those biotic features in our environment. They're living, that they need food and moisture in order to go about their lives. So we also learned, or we're having a look at today, the fact that we can harness some of these microorganisms in our lives. So for years and years, humans have been baking bread. Okay, now in order to bake bread, we use a microorganism, we take advantage of a microorganism called yeast. Now yeast is a microorganism which is found wild in the air all around us, but nowadays we buy in dried form or in various other forms in the shops. But historically, it was these wild natural yeast that we used to help in our lives. So we use yeast for a couple of different things, lots of different things, but a couple of them we're going to have a look at. Yeast, what its enzyme does is it breaks down glucose into ethanol and carbon dioxide. So it breaks these big glucose molecules down into smaller ethanol molecules. In the process, it also makes some carbon dioxide. So when we're using that for bread, we are taking advantage of that carbon dioxide being released to form the air pockets that you see in loaves of bread. So what I have here is I have Sauron, the sourdough starter. So Sauron is wild yeast cultivation. So I have lots of wild yeast living in here. Now Sauron's not been fed for a while, so he's quite hungry. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put on my scale and I am going to pop in, give Sauron a bit of a stir. Try and get some nice yeast to it, settling around. And then I'm going to measure out some of Sauron into my bowl here. So I've got 1, 2, bit of a trip down the side. 40 grams. I'm going to put 50 grams, roughly, there we go, of Sauron into my bowl. I'm going to leave my spoon in there because I don't want to make too much of a mess. I'm going to take 50 grams now of plain flour and I'm going to feed this to Sauron. So Sauron's going to break down the glucose, that's natural sugars and starches that are in my flour. So I'm going to pop that in on my scales until I am roughly at 100 grams. I've got 88. Have a little look. A wee tiny bit more. So I've got fed, I've given Sauron some food, but not good enough for that. What he needs as well is some water. So I have here just some tap water, but I've made sure that I've got from the hot tap and I've let it cool down a little bit. So if Sauron's filled with yeast, and yeast are our microorganisms, we know that microorganisms, just like any human being, aren't going to like really hot boiling water. I also know that when we're cold, we tend to slow down. So Sauron's going to work a lot quicker if he's warm. So I've got my warm water here, glugging in. I've got about 50 grams of water there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that a stir. Now, once I've stirred that up, got rid of the lumps, what we should begin to see is that the yeast start to break down enzymes, that use their enzymes to break down that glucose and to create our ethanol and our carbon dioxide. So what we often find, especially because this Sauron's been asleep for a while here, you've not fed him in a bit, it might take a little while to get going, but what you will eventually end up with and what you will eventually see, don't taste your biology, guys. What you'll eventually end up doing, here's one that I set up earlier. This is ready. Turn and show us. What you'll eventually see is you will see big bubbles. So if we have a look here, you can pop the bubbles that have formed. You can see the size, the volume of this in there. It was started with just 50 grams of Sauron, okay, and a little bit more flour and water. And I've got there, so you can see I've got this big bubbly mass. It's really light, okay. It's all filled with air that the yeast have generated. So over the course of this class, we're going to leave Sauron here. If you have a look in the top though, you can already see, I don't know if this will show up on camera, you can already see some bubbles. You can see the lumps there. They're not lumps, they're bubbles. You can see the bubbles. Well, that was a big one popped. Bubbles forming as the yeast starts to break that down. Alright, so guys, we are in a position to start thinking about our bread and using that for our bread. And what we are taking advantage of is that fermentation process where the glucose is broken down into ethanol and carbon dioxide. All thanks to Sauron and the wild yeast, the microorganisms that we have in here.